there's a question you've been avoiding. It sits in the back of your mind during therapy sessions. It surfaces when you tell your story to a new friend. It whispers to you in the quiet moments when you're alone with your thoughts. Why am I still here? Not here in the existential sense. Here in this pattern, this cycle, this familiar prison of suffering that you've lived in for so long. It started to feel like home. You know the pattern I'm talking about. The same relationship dynamic with different faces. The same self-sabotage at the edge of success. The same retreat into isolation when connection gets too real. The same story you tell about why things never work out for you. You've noticed something strange. You say you want to change. You say you want to heal. You say you want to break free from this cycle, but you don't. If you're watching this, you're ready to hear something that will shatter the comfortable narrative you've built around your suffering. Something that will make you question whether you've been the victim of your circumstances or the architect of your own prison. This is about secondary gain, the hidden payoff you get from staying exactly where you are. Sigmund Freud identified this mechanism over a century ago. He watched patients who claimed they wanted to heal, but somehow never quite got there, who found elaborate reasons why this treatment wouldn't work or that approach didn't apply to them. He realized something disturbing. These patients were getting something from their illness, something valuable enough that healing became a threat. And you are doing the same thing. Right now, in this moment, you are extracting value from your suffering. You are harvesting benefits from your brokenness. You are being paid in a currency you don't want to acknowledge. Attention, identity, safety, control, excuse, meaning. Your suffering is not just something happening to you. It's something you're using. And until you see this, until you face this brutal truth, you will stay exactly where you are, comfortable in your discomfort, familiar with your pain, addicted to the very thing you claim. You want to escape. This is not about blame. This is about sight, about seeing the mechanism that's been running in the shadows of your consciousness, the hidden economy of your own psychology. You think you're stuck because the wound is too deep, or the trauma is too complex, or the patterns are too ingrained. But what if you're stuck because stuck is where the reward is? Let me show you how this works. Think back to the first time something truly terrible happened to you. The moment that became your origin story. The wound that started it all. In that moment, you were genuinely hurt, genuinely victimized, genuinely overwhelmed by circumstances you didn't create and couldn't control. And the world responded. People showed up. They listened. They cared. They said, "I'm so sorry this happened to you." They treated you gently. They lowered their expectations. They gave you space. You received something you'd never received before, or something you'd been starving for, or something you'd forgotten existed. Compassion, attention, significance. Your pain made you matter, and your nervous system took note. This is the moment the secondary gain begins. Not consciously, not maliciously, but mechanically. Your brain, doing what brains do, noticed the correlation between suffering and reward. When I suffer, people care. When I struggle, people gather. When I'm broken, I'm not alone. And a transaction was born. Freud understood this as a kind of psychological economics. Every symptom, every pattern, every persistent problem has both a primary function and a secondary one. The primary function is obvious. The anxiety protects you from perceived danger. The depression slows you down when you're overwhelmed. The addiction numbs unbearable feelings, but the secondary function is hidden. The secondary function is what you gain from having the problem. The anxiety keeps people from expecting too much from you. The depression excuses you from having to show up fully. The addiction gives you an identity and a community. You see it now? You're not just suffering, you're benefiting. And this is why you haven't healed. Because healing would mean losing the benefit, losing the attention, losing the identity, losing the excuse, losing the only currency you know how to trade in. Think about what happens when you post about your struggle on social media. The likes flood in. The comments overflow with sympathy. People you haven't spoken to in years reach out. Your suffering connects you. Think about what happens when you tell someone new about your trauma, how they lean in, how they soften, how they treat you with special care. Your suffering protects you. Think about what happens when you fail at something, and you can point to your past as the reason, how it relieves you of responsibility, how it explains everything. Your suffering excuses you. This is the hidden economy, and you've been participating in it for so long, you've forgotten there's another way to get what you need. Nietzsche saw this pattern everywhere. He watched how the weak transformed their weakness into a kind of moral currency, how they made their suffering sacred, how they created entire systems where being victimized became a form of power. He called it slave morality, the morality of those who cannot act directly, so they act indirectly, who cannot create value, so they extract it from their wounds. You are trading in this economy, whether you know it or not. Every time you lead with your trauma in a new relationship, you're trading. Every time you explain your limitations before you try, you're trading. Every time you get sympathy for your struggle instead of respect for your growth, you're trading. And the market pays well, until you realize the price. Here's how deep this goes. You're not just getting attention from others. You're getting something far more insidious from yourself. You're getting permission. Permission not to try. Permission not to risk. Permission not to become who you're capable of becoming. Because as long as you're wounded, as long as you're healing, as long as you're processing your trauma, you don't have to face the terrifying possibility of your own potential. Let me show you the mechanism. You have a goal, something you want to do or become or create. But pursuing it means risk. It means possible failure. It means discovering the limits of your capability. So your mind offers you a deal. Don't pursue it. Instead, work on your wounds. Process your trauma. Heal your inner child. Deal with your triggers. And when you're finally healed, then you'll pursue the goal. It sounds reasonable. It sounds healthy. It sounds like good self-care. But it's a trap. Because the healing never finishes. The wounds are never fully processed. The triggers are never completely resolved. There's always one more layer, one more issue, one more thing to work through before you're ready. And meanwhile, years pass. Opportunities vanish. Life moves on without you. But you stay safe, protected by your suffering, excused by your healing journey, validated by a culture that says you need endless time to recover. This is what Freud called the unconscious motivation to remain ill. You consciously want to heal, but unconsciously, you're terrified of what healing would demand of you. Because healing means showing up, means being responsible, means trying and possibly failing without the excuse of your wounds to fall back on. Healing means becoming ordinary. Just another person with no special circumstances, no tragic backstory, no exceptional reason for struggle. Just you and your choices and your consequences. And that's terrifying. So you stay in the healing process itself. You make healing your identity. You become someone who is always recovering, always processing, always one breakthrough away from being ready, but never actually ready, never actually moving, never actually risking the discovery that maybe your wounds weren't the thing holding you back. Maybe it was your attachment to those wounds. The mechanism works like this. Every time you approach the edge of real change, your nervous system floods you with anxiety. Your mind offers you a familiar refuge. Go back to processing. Go back to healing. Go back to the safe identity of the wounded one. And you do. Because the secondary gain of staying wounded is more immediately rewarding than the uncertain payoff of becoming whole. You get to keep the sympathy, keep the special treatment, keep the excuse, keep the identity. All you have to give up is your freedom. All you have to surrender is your potential. All you have to sacrifice is the life you could have lived. If you'd stopped trading in the economy of suffering and started building in the economy of growth. But you don't see this, because seeing it would mean facing the most uncomfortable question of your life. What if I've been choosing this? Let me tell you what you're really afraid of. You're afraid that if you let go of your suffering, you'll lose your identity. You've spent years becoming the person who survived that thing, the person who carries that burden, the person whose struggles explain their life. It's in your bio. It's in your story. It's how people know you. This is Sarah. She went through that terrible thing with her family. This is Marcus. He struggles with severe anxiety. This is Elena. She's healing from complex trauma. Your wound has become your name. And if you heal, if you truly move past it, then who are you? Just another person. Unremarkable. Ordinary. No longer special in your suffering. This is the terror that Nietzsche understood. The terror of becoming who you actually are, rather than who your wounds made you. He watched people cling to their weakness like a badge of honor, watched them build entire identities around being victimized, watched them resist the very freedom they claimed to want. Because freedom is responsibility, and responsibility is terrifying. As long as you're wounded, you have a reason for every failure, every limitation, every time you don't measure up. I can't because of what happened to me. It's the most powerful sentence in your vocabulary. It ends every argument. It stops every expectation. It protects you from judgment, but it also stops you from living. Here's the other thing you're afraid of. You're afraid that if you let go of your suffering, you'll lose your connections. Because your suffering is how you bond. It's how you relate. It's how you know who's safe and who cares. You test people with your wounds. You share your trauma as a way of creating intimacy. You bond over shared suffering with others who understand. And these connections are real. The care is genuine. The community matters. But it's a community built on brokenness. And if you become whole, do you still belong? This is why people often sabotage their own healing, not consciously, but mechanically. Because at some level, they know that getting better means leaving the only community that ever truly accepted them, the community of the wounded. And then there's the deepest fear, the one you barely let yourself think. What if I heal and I'm still not enough? What if I do the work and face the fear and grow past the pain and I still fail? What if I try without the excuse and I discover that I'm just not capable? Right now, you have a shield. Your suffering explains everything. It's not that you're inadequate, it's that you're wounded. But if you heal and you still struggle, then what? Then it might just be you. Your actual limitations, your real capacity. Not your trauma, just you. And that's too terrifying to face. So you stay wounded, safe in the knowledge that your true potential remains untested. Safe in the belief that you could be so much more if only you weren't so broken, never having to discover whether that's actually true. This is the real secondary gain. The protection from self-knowledge. The excuse that prevents you from ever having to face what you're actually made of. Your suffering is not just your identity. It's your shield, your excuse, your prison disguised as sanctuary. And letting it go would mean standing naked in the world. Just you. No story, no excuse, no special circumstances. Just your choices and their consequences. Just your actions and their results. Just you. And you're not sure you can bear to meet yourself without the armor. Here's what nobody tells you about secondary gain. You're not trapped by your wounds. You're trapped by your attachment to what your wounds give you. And that attachment is a choice. Not a choice you made consciously. Not a choice you'd admit to making. But a choice nonetheless. Every day, in 1,000 small ways, you choose the benefit over the freedom. You choose the sympathy over the respect. You choose the excuse over the responsibility. You choose the familiar pain over the unknown possibility. And the world lets you. Because we live in a culture that has made suffering sacred, that treats victims as holy, that gives endless permission for healing without ever expecting you to actually heal. You can stay in therapy for decades. You can process the same trauma in different ways forever. You can always be recovering, always be healing, always be on a journey that never actually arrives anywhere. And everyone will nod and say, take all the time you need. But here's what Nietzsche understood. There is no healing without risk. There is no growth without danger. There is no transformation without the willingness to lose what you have for what you could become. The slave morality says suffer nobly and be rewarded for your suffering. The master morality says suffer and use it to become stronger. You've been living in slave morality, trading your wounds for sympathy, your pain for attention, your limitations for excuses. And it's kept you safe, but it's also kept you small. There's another economy, an economy where you trade action for results, where you trade courage for growth, where you trade the temporary pain of change for the permanent expansion of capability. But you can't participate in that economy while you're still collecting payments from this one. You can't become powerful while you're still invested in being pitied. You can't discover your capacity while you're still clinging to your limitations as identity. You can't be free while you're still holding on to the chains because they were familiar. The choice is this simple and this brutal. Do you want the benefits of suffering, or do you want freedom? Do you want the attention, or do you want the growth? Do you want the excuse, or do you want the life? You can't have both. The secondary gain of staying wounded is incompatible with the primary gain of becoming whole. And every day, you pretend you're trying to heal while secretly harvesting the benefits of being broken. You're choosing. You're choosing comfort over courage. You're choosing safety over sovereignty. You're choosing the known hell over the unknown heaven. This is the moment when you stop pretending the choice isn't yours, when you stop waiting for permission to heal, when you stop collecting sympathy and start collecting scars from actual battles instead of old wounds. Freud said the unconscious has no sense of time. Your old wounds stay fresh because you keep them fresh. You rehearse them. You tell the story. You live as if they just happened yesterday. Because if they're old, if they're healed, then you lose the dividend they pay. But what if you let them be old? What if you let them be scars instead of open wounds? What if you stopped getting value from your past and started creating value in your present? What if you chose growth over gain? Let me tell you how this actually works. How you actually break the addiction to your own suffering. How you stop harvesting secondary gain and start building primary value. It starts with ruthless honesty. You sit down and you ask yourself the most uncomfortable question you've ever asked. What am I getting from staying exactly where I am? And you list it, all of it, without shame, without judgment, just observation, attention from friends when I talk about my struggle, identity as someone who survived something hard, excuse for why I haven't pursued my goals, permission to avoid risk, community with others who share my wounds, protection from failure because I never fully try. You write it all down, every benefit, every payoff, every piece of secondary gain you've been collecting while pretending you just want to heal. This is the hardest thing you'll ever do because it means seeing yourself clearly, seeing that you've been complicit in your own suffering, not because you're weak, but because you're human. And humans are strategic, even when the strategy is unconscious. Second, you calculate the cost. For every benefit you've listed, you write what it's costing you. The attention I get for my struggle costs me respect. The identity I've built around my wounds costs me the possibility of a new identity. The excuse I use costs me the discovery of my actual capability. The permission to avoid costs me the life I could have lived. The community of shared suffering costs me connection based on shared growth. The protection from failure costs me the possibility of success. You look at this ledger, this accounting of your hidden economy, and you decide whether the trade is worth it. Most people never do this calculation. They just keep trading, year after year, never realizing what they're giving up for what they're getting. But you're not most people. You're here. You're watching this. You're ready to see. Third, you starve the old economy. You stop trading in it. You stop collecting the currency of suffering. When someone asks how you are, you don't lead with your struggle. When you fail at something, you don't immediately point to your trauma as explanation. When you're on social media, you don't post about your pain for sympathy. You cut off the supply. You stop feeding the mechanism. You let the old reward system starve while you build a new one. And it will hurt. You'll feel the withdrawal. You'll miss the attention. You'll want to go back to the familiar payoff, but you don't. You sit with the discomfort of not being special in your suffering, not being seen as fragile, not being treated with kid gloves. You let people expect things from you. You let yourself fail without an excuse. You risk being ordinary. Fourth, you build in the new economy. You start trading action for results, effort for growth, courage for capability. You do one thing you've been avoiding, something small, something that scares you precisely because you can't use your wounds as an excuse if you fail. And you fail, or you succeed. Either way, you learn something about who you actually are when you're not hiding behind your suffering. Then you do it again. Another action, another risk, another step into the unknown territory of your own potential. You build a new identity, one based on what you do rather than what was done to you, one based on your choices rather than your circumstances. And slowly, the new economy becomes more rewarding than the old one. The respect you get from trying is better than the sympathy you got from suffering. The pride you feel from growing is deeper than the significance you felt from struggling. The connection you make through shared courage is stronger than the bond you had through shared wounds. You realize that you were trading in the wrong currency all along. The real payoff was never in the suffering. It was in what lay beyond it. But you couldn't see that while you were still collecting rent from your wounds. Let me tell you what happens when you finally let go of the secondary gain. When you stop trading in the economy of suffering and start building in the economy of growth. At first, people are confused. They expect you to show up the old way, to lead with your struggle, to bond through your brokenness. And when you don't, they don't know how to relate to you. Some of them will try to pull you back. They'll say you're in denial. They'll say you're not dealing with your trauma. They'll say you're being fake or inauthentic. What they're really saying is, you're not giving me the currency I know how to trade in anymore. And you'll have to let them be confused. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them think you're doing it wrong. Because their comfort is not your responsibility. Then something else happens. You realize how much energy you were spending maintaining the old system. How exhausting it was to constantly perform your suffering, to keep your wounds fresh, to harvest sympathy from every interaction. And that energy becomes available for something else, for creation, for growth, for becoming. You start moving faster than you thought possible, not because you suddenly have no problems, but because you're no longer invested in keeping your problems visible. You start connecting differently, not through shared trauma, but through shared vision, not through mutual wounding, but through mutual building. You discover that respect feels better than pity, that being challenged feels better than being coddled, that being held to a standard feels better than being given endless excuses. You become dangerous in the best possible way, dangerous to systems that depend on your helplessness, dangerous to narratives that keep you small, dangerous to anyone who benefits from your staying wounded. This is what Nietzsche meant by the transvaluation of values. You stop valuing what the weak value, sympathy, safety, excuse, and you start valuing what the strong value, growth, challenge, responsibility. You become someone who faces what needs to be faced, not because you have to, but because you choose to. Someone who takes action despite uncertainty, who risks failure without excuse, who shows up fully even when it would be easier to hide behind old wounds. And here's what nobody tells you. This is healing, real healing. Not the endless processing, not the perpetual recovery, not the identity built on brokenness, but the simple, unglamorous act of choosing growth over gain, action over attention, sovereignty over sympathy. You don't heal by staying in your wounds. You heal by walking away from what your wounds were giving you, by giving up the secondary gain for the primary life, by choosing to be free even when freedom costs you the benefits of suffering. This is the path. Not comfortable, not easy, not supported by a culture that wants you to stay small and controllable and forever in the process of healing, but true and available to you right now, in this moment, in this choice. Will you keep trading in the economy of suffering? Keep collecting the dividends your wounds pay? Or will you walk away from the reward and discover what you're actually capable of when you stop using your past as currency? The suffering happened. The wounds were real. The trauma was legitimate. But what you do with it now is choice. You can keep harvesting it for sympathy and excuse and identity. Or you can use it as fuel and move forward into the life that's waiting for you on the other side of the secondary gain. The life where you're not special in your suffering, just capable in your sovereignty. The reward for staying wounded is real, but the cost is your life. You can keep collecting sympathy, or you can start creating something worth respecting. The choice was always yours. The question is whether you're finally ready to make it.